3, the Honourable Marion Street.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and asks, have all recent actions of New Zealand diplomats been consistent with government policy?
The Honourable Chris Finlayson.
On behalf of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I suppose that depends on what the member's definition of recent is. It could, for example, refer to Jonathan Hunt when High Commissioner in London, in which case the answer would be no.
I don't think that was quite called for. Supplementary question. The Honourable point of order, the Honourable Chris Finlayson.
In an endeavour to be helpful, I refer to Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia, which says that until recent...
The Speaker doesn't need lectures on what recent means. Almost ancient history. The Honourable Marion Street.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker. Does the government then stand by its decision to support the freedom of expression on the internet statement delivered by Sweden at a meeting of the Human Rights Council on the 10th of June 2011, and is that recent enough?
The Honourable Chris Finlayson.
I don't know that a statement by Sweden constitutes New Zealand government policy.
The Honourable Marion Street. Order.
Supplementary.
The Honourable Marion Street.
Did the Minister receive advice from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs about endorsing the Swedish statement? And did he approve New Zealand's support of it, even though the UK and France, which have similar copyright infringement laws, did not support it?
The Honourable Chris Finlayson.
That's a very particular question. The Minister's overseas and I'm the acting Minister. If the member wants that degree of particularity, Mr Robertson, she should ask the right kind of question.
The Honourable... point of order, the Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Mr Speaker, I ask you to consider the supplementary in light of the primary that was asked and ask you whether in fact it follows, because the primary question was about recent actions of New Zealand diplomats. And I can imagine the Minister preparing for that, but the supplementary actually related to the government's position on Swedish policy to do with something heaven knows what.
Order. I don't think I need any assistance on this matter. The member makes a perfectly valid point that where primary questions are vague, there's no way ministers can be expected to have particular information, and I thought the Minister's answer was, I rather than the Speaker rule a question out because it's not relating closely enough to the primary question, the Minister obviously is perfectly entitled to say, as the Minister did say, he doesn't have that particular information, and no Minister can be criticised for that when the primary question is so vague. The Honourable Marion Street, supplementary question.
Mr Speaker. Does he agree with the statements of the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs made on behalf of a number of countries, including New Zealand, that, quote, "We call on all states to ensure strong protection of freedom of expression online in accordance with international human rights laws," unquote, and that, quote, "cutting off users from access to the internet is generally not a proportionate sanction," unquote.
The Honourable Chris Finlayson.
On behalf of the Minister...
Point of order, the Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Mr Speaker, that is actually out of order, I'd suggest to you, that supplementary, because it is actually a question without notice. Because the primary question is about the behaviour of diplomats. The supplementary questions have got nothing whatsoever to do with the behaviour of diplomats, and in fact, if that supplementary is allowed, I think we should go back to hearing about Jonathan Hunt.
Order. I mean, the member's point, the member has a valid point that these questions are a long stretch from the primary question, but we've always had a tradition that imprecise primary questions or primary questions that leave a wide field of supplementaries are in order. But the risk the questioner faces is that they then ask a question that the Minister cannot be expected to have the information to answer. This particular question asked whether the Minister agreed with a Minister of Foreign Affairs of another country. Now, I could almost rule it on the basis the Minister has no responsibility whatsoever. But we do accept questions that seek opinions. And so the minister's entitled to give his opinion whether he agrees with this particular foreign minister or not, but I certainly won't be looking for any particular answer. The minister's got a lot of licence in answering a question like that. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Speaker, and it goes to your response, sir. This question is a very specific one, and it goes to whether New Zealand diplomats have been following New Zealand government policy. It is the absolute right of a member to raise an example.
The member's now debating with the Speaker about my rulings, and if the member asking the questions had a particular concern about this issue in relation to what a Swedish position had been taken and whether or not that covered New Zealand and these kinds of issues, it would have certainly been helpful had the primary question indicated the general subject matter of the questioning, and then the minister could have been prepared to answer them. But to have a general primary question covering the actions of New Zealand, of all recent actions of New Zealand diplomats, is a very wide primary question. And the remedies in members' own hands. They cannot expect ministers to have detailed information on specific cases when a question is that wide. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, I can understand that, and ministers are quite often not across the details of their portfolios. But, sir, you should not be telling members not to ask
I'm not going to tolerate any more of that.
I'm not going to.
The member has used a point of order to criticise ministers. I mean, the member has just used a point of order to say some ministers are not across their portfolios. That is unacceptable. A minister cannot be blamed for not having detail on a particular case when the primary question is that wide. And you'll notice today where specific questions have been asked, ministers have answered them because they know I'll insist they answer them. But where a question is this wide, a primary question is this wide, there's no way I can expect the minister to have detail. And as I said, the asking an opinion about the statement of another country's foreign minister is on the limits of standing orders anyhow, but I've acknowledged that ministers can be asked of their opinions, and if the minister has an opinion on that matter, he's certainly entitled to give it and answer. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask that you review the tape on this, because the member in fact didn't ask about the minister's opinion on the Swedish, it was the minister's opinion on the New Zealand diplomats putting New Zealand in a position where they supported a Swedish statement, which was
the member is debating this order. The member is debating the substance of the issue. I always do look where there's any controversy. I always do look at what transpired, and I'm happy to do that. But I'm pretty certain that I've not erred on this in accepting that the minister cannot be expected to have the detail of this matter at his fingertips. But he's welcome to the answer. What I might do is invite the member to repeat her question, because it's been so long. I want members to be aware what the question was. The Honourable Marion Street to repeat her question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the minister agree with a statement by the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs on behalf of a number of countries, including New Zealand, signed up to by diplomats representing New Zealand opinion that, quote, "We call on all states to ensure strong protection of freedom of expression online in accordance with international human rights law," unquote, and that, quote, "cutting off users from access to the internet is generally not a proportionate sanction," unquote.
The Honourable Chris Finnis.
Mr. Speaker, I refer to that part of the question by the member that refers to the statements by the Swedish Foreign Minister and say that the Swedish Foreign Minister is not a New Zealand diplomat.
The Honourable Marion Street.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. The Honourable Marion Street.
I'm just trying to select which of the many supplementaries
order.
I might answer.
Order.
To the Minister. Having effectively endorsed the report of the Special Rapporteur by having a diplomat sign New Zealand's signature to a statement given on behalf of New Zealand, which finds that disconnecting users on the grounds of violating intellectual property rights law is disproportionate and a violation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, will he now acknowledge that the ability by order in council to terminate internet connections contained in our current Copyright Amendment Act 2011 is a breach of human rights and pledge to remove it.
The Honourable Chris Finlayson.
I dispute the underlying premise of the question when the honourable member says, quote, effectively endorsed, unquote.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Why does New Zealand say overseas it's a breach of human rights, but does it here?
The Honourable Chris Finlayson.
I dispute on behalf of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I dispute the underlying premise of the member's question.
Point of order, the Honourable Marion Street.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I seek leave of the House to table the freedom of expression on the internet cross-regional statement made on behalf of the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Sweden on behalf of a number of countries, including New Zealand, dated 10 June 2011.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question number 4, the Honourable Tau Henare.
Speaker, my question